Joel David Coen and Ethan Jesse Coen, known informally as the Coen brothers, are Academy Award-winning American film directors, screenwriters, producers, and editors. Their films include Blood Simple, Barton Fink, Fargo, The Big Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? No Country for Old Men, A Serious Man, Burn After Reading, True Grit, and Inside Llewyn Davis. The brothers write, direct, and produce their films jointly, although until The Ladykillers, Joel received sole credit for directing and Ethan for producing. They often alternate top billing for their screenplays while sharing film credits for editor under the alias Roderick Jaynes. Background: early life. Joel and Ethan Coen, of Jewish descent, grew up in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis. Their mother, Rena, was an art historian at St. Cloud State University, and their father, Edward Coen, was an economist at the University of Minnesota. When they were children, Joel saved money from mowing lawns to buy a Vivitar Super 8 camera. Together, the brothers remade movies they saw on television, with a neighborhood kid, Mark Zimmering, as the star. Their first attempt was a romp titled, Henry Kissinger, Man on the Go. Cornel Wilde's The Naked Prey became their Zimas in Zambia, which also featured Ethan as a native with a spear. The brothers' Jewish upbringing was seldom related to their film's subjects or stories, with some exceptions, such as A Serious Man, translated into Hebrew as The Good Jew. Joel notes that, in regards to whether a background influences our filmmaking, who knows? We don't think about it. There's no doubt that our Jewish heritage affects how we see things. Education: Joel and Ethan graduated from St. Louis Park High School in 1973 and 1976, respectively. They both also graduated from Bard College at Simon's Rock in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Joel then spent 4 years in the undergraduate film program at New York University, where he made a 30-minute thesis film called Soundings. Ethan went on to Princeton University and earned an undergraduate degree in philosophy in 1979. His senior thesis was a 41-page essay, Two Views of Wittgenstein's Later Philosophy. Personal lives: Joel has been married to actress Frances McDormand since 1984. They adopted a son from Paraguay, named Pedro McDormand Coen. McDormand has acted in 6 of the Coen brothers' films, including a minor appearance in Miller's Crossing, a supporting role in Raising Arizona, lead roles in Blood Simple and The Man Who Wasn't There, her Academy Award-winning role in Fargo, and her latest starring role in Burn After Reading. She also did a voiceover in Barton Fink. Ethan is married to film editor Tricia Cook, and they have 2 children, daughter Dusty and son Buster Jacob. Both couples live in New York City. Career: 1980s. After graduating from New York University, Joel worked as a production assistant on a variety of industrial films and music videos. He developed a talent for film editing and met Sam Raimi, who was looking for an assistant editor on his first feature film The Evil Dead. In 1984, the brothers wrote and directed Blood Simple, their first commercial film together. Set in Texas, the film tells the tale of a shifty, sleazy bar owner who hires a private detective to kill his wife and her lover. The film contains elements that point to their future direction, distinctive homages to genre movies, plot twists layered over a simple story, a dark humor, and mise-en-scene. The film starred Frances McDormand, who would go on to feature in many of the Coen brothers' films. Upon release, the film received much praise and won awards for Joel's direction at both the Sundance and Independent Spirit Awards. Their next project was Crime Wave, directed by Sam Raimi and written by the Coens and Raimi. The brothers' next film was Raising Arizona, the story of an unlikely married couple, ex-convict H.I. and police officer Ed, who long for a baby but are unable to conceive. When a local furniture tycoon appears on television with his newly born quintuplets and jokes that they are more than we can handle, H.I. steals one of the quintuplets to bring up as their own. The film featured Frances McDormand, John Goodman, William Forsythe, Sam McMurray, and Randall Tex Cobb. 1990s, Miller's Crossing, released in 1990, starred Albert Finney, Gabriel Byrne, and John Turturro. The film is about feuding gangsters in the Prohibition era, inspired by Dashiell Hammett's novels Red Harvest and The Glass Key. The following year, they released Barton Fink. Set in 1941, in which a New York playwright moves to Los Angeles to write a B-movie. He settles down in his hotel room to commence writing but suffers writer's block until he is invaded by the man next door. Barton Fink was a critical success, earning Oscar nominations and winning 3 major awards at the 1991 Cannes Film Festival, including the Palme d'Or. It was their first film with cinematographer Roger Deakins, a key collaborator for the next 15 years. The Hudsucker Proxy was released in 1994. In it, the board of a large corporation in 1958 New York City appoints a naive schmo as president, to sabotage the firm's own share price, so the board could later purchase their company's stock cheaply to retain ownership. However, their plan backfires when the new president invents the hula hoop. The film bombed at the box office, even though it featured Paul Newman and Jennifer Jason Leigh, and despite its having received good reviews by audiences in the intervening years. The brothers returned to a more familiar theme with the crime thriller Fargo, set in their home state of Minnesota. Jerry Lundegaard, who has serious financial problems, has his wife kidnapped so that his wealthy father-in-law will pay the ransom. His plan goes wrong when the kidnappers deviate from the plan and local cop Marge Gunderson starts to investigate. Produced on a small budget of $7 million, Fargo was a critical and commercial success, with particular praise for its dialogue and McDormand's performance. The film received several awards, including a BAFTA Award and Cannes Award for Direction, and 2 Oscars, and Best Original Screenplay and an Best Actress Oscar for McDormand. In the Coens' next film, The Big Lebowski, the Dude, a Los Angeles slacker, is used as an unwitting pawn in a kidnapping plot with his bowling buddies. Well received by critics, it is now regarded as a classic cult film. 2000s, the Coen brothers' next film, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, was another critical and commercial success. The title was borrowed from the Preston Sturges film Sullivan's Travels, whose lead character, movie director John Sullivan, had planned to make a film with that title. Based loosely on Homer's Odyssey, the story is set in Mississippi in the 1930s and follows a trio of escaped convicts who, after absconding from a chain gang, journey home in an attempt to recover bank heist loot that the leader has buried. But they have no clear perception of where they are going. The film also highlighted the comic abilities of George Clooney, who starred as the oddball-led character Ulysses Everett McGill. The film's bluegrass and old-time soundtrack, offbeat humor, and digitally desaturated cinematography made it a critical and commercial hit. The soundtrack CD was also successful, spawning a concert and a concert DVD of its own, that coincided with a resurgence in interest in American folk music. The Coen brothers next produced another noirish thriller, The Man Who Wasn't There. Set in late 1940s California, a laconic chain-smoking barber discovers a way to blackmail his wife's lover and use the proceeds to invest in a dry cleaning business. The film's twists, turns, and dark humor are typical of Coen films, but here the slow pace and dead-end roads look demonstrate that the film is meant more for enthusiasts than casual audiences. Intolerable Cruelty, starring George Clooney and Catherine Zeta-Jones, is a throwback to the romantic comedies of the 1940s. The story focuses on hotshot divorce lawyer Miles Massey and a beautiful divorce copywriter whom Massey managed to prevent from receiving any money in her divorce. She vows to get even with him while, at the same time, he becomes smitten with her. Intolerable Cruelty divided the critics. Some applauded the romantic screwball comedy elements, while others wondered why the Coens would wish to subject audiences to their take on this particular genre. In 2004, the Coen brothers made The Ladykillers, a remake of the Ealing Studios classic. A professor, played by Tom Hanks, assembles a team to rob a casino. They rent a room in an elderly woman's house to plan the heist. When the woman discovers the plot, the gang decides to murder her to ensure her silence. The Coens received some of the most lukewarm reviews of their careers in response to this movie. Much of the criticism centered on the idea that a relatively faithful reworking of an existing classic, in contrast to the broader genre homages that made up the bulk of the brothers' prior work, did not provide the creative latitude they needed to place their distinctive stamp on the work. No Country for Old Men, released in November 2007, closely follows the 2005 novel of the same name by Cormac McCarthy. Vietnam veteran Llewellyn Moss, living near the Texas-Mexico border, stumbles upon, and decides to take, $2 million in drug money. He then has to go on the run to avoid those looking to recover the money, including sociopathic killer Anton Chigurh, who confounds both Llewellyn and local sheriff Ed Tombell. This plotline is a return to noir themes, but in some respects it was a departure for the Coens. With the exception of Stephen Root, none of the stable of regular Coen actors appears in the film. No Country has received nearly universal critical praise, garnering a 94% fresh rating at Rotten Tomatoes. The film won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay, all of which were received by the Coens, as well as Best Supporting Actor received by Barton. It was the first time since 1961 the two directors had received the honor of Best Director at the same time. In January 2008, Ethan Coen's play Almost an Evening premiered off-Broadway at the Atlantic Theatre Company Stage 2 and opened to mostly enthusiastic reviews. The initial run closed on February 10, 2008, but the same production was moved to a new theatre for a commercial off-Broadway run. The commercial run began in March 2008 and ran until June 1, 2008 at the Bleecker Street Theatre in New York City, produced by the Atlantic Theatre Company and Art Meets Commerce. In May 2009, the Atlantic Theatre Company produced Coen's Offices, as part of their main stage season at the Linda Gross Theatre. Burn After Reading, a comedy starring Brad Pitt and George Clooney, was released September 12, 2008. It portrays a collision course between a gym instructor, spies, and internet dating. Despite being released to mixed reviews, it debuted at number 1 in North America. In 2009, they directed a television commercial titled Air Freshener for the Reality Coalition. A Serious Man was released on October 2, 2009. It has been described as a gentle but dark period comedy with a low budget. The film is based loosely on the Book of Job and the Coen brothers' own childhoods in a Jewish academic family in the largely Jewish suburb of St. Louis Park, Minnesota. Other filming took place in late summer 2008 in some neighborhoods of Roseville and Bloomington, Minnesota, at Normandale Community College, and at St. Olaf College. The movie went on to be nominated for the Oscars for Best Picture as well as Best Original Screenplay. 2010's True Grit is based on the 1968 novel of the same name by Charles Portis. Filming was done in Texas and New Mexico. Hailey Steinfeld stars as Mattie Ross along with Jeff Bridges as Marshall Rooster Cogburn. Matt Damon and Josh Brolin also appear in the movie. True Grit was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Ethan Coen wrote the one-act comedy Talking Cure, which was produced on Broadway in 2011 as part of Relatively Speaking, an anthology of 3 one-act plays by Coen, Elaine May, and Woody Allen. Inside Llewyn Davis is a treatise on the 1960s folk music scene in New York City's Greenwich Village and very loosely based on the life of Dave Van Ronk. The film stars Oscar Isaac, Justin Timberlake and Carey Mulligan. It won the Grand Prix at the 2013 Cannes Film Festival, where it was highly praised by critics. The Coens also contributed to the screenplay for Unbroken, along with Richard LaGravenese and William Nicholson. The film, directed by Angelina Jolie, is based on Laura Hillenbrand's non-fiction book, Unbroken, a World War II story of survival, resilience, and redemption, is set for release on December 25, 2014. The Coens' next feature film is entitled Hail, Caesar! About a fixer in 1950s Hollywood, starring George Clooney, Josh Brolin, Channing Tatum, Tilda Swinton, Ralph Fiennes, Jonah Hill and Scarlett Johansson. Planned and uncompleted projects. In a 1998 interview with Alex Simon for Venice magazine, the Coens discussed a project called The Contemplations, which would be an anthology of short films based on stories in a leather-bound book from a dusty old library. In 2001, Joel stated that a Cold War comedy called 62 Skidoo is one I'd like to do someday. The Coens had hoped to film James Dickey's novel To the White Sea. They were due to start production in 2002, with Jeremy Thomas producing and Brad Pitt in the lead role, but it was cancelled when the Coens felt that the budget offered was not enough to successfully produce the film. As well as their own planned projects, the Coens have collaborated on productions with other directors. One, reported in 2005, is Suburb Icon, a comedy starring and directed by George Clooney. It will be written and produced by the Coens. In 2008, it had been announced that the Coen brothers would write and direct an adaptation of Michael Chabon's novel, The Yiddish Policeman's Union. They were to produce the film with Scott Rudin for Columbia Pictures. In the fall of 2012, however, Chabon told Mother Jones that the Coen brothers wrote a draft of a script and then they seemed to move on, and that the film rights had lapsed back to me. In 2009, the Coen brothers stated that they are interested in making a sequel to Barton Fink called Old Fink, which would take place in the 1960s, around the same time period as A Serious Man. The brothers also stated that they have had talks with John Turturro in reprising his role as Fink, but they were waiting until he was actually old enough to play the part. In 2009, Turturro also stated that he would be interested in making a spin-off of The Big Lebowski about his character, Jesus, but the Coens have not publicly confirmed the likelihood of this project going forward. In 2011, the brothers were reportedly working on a television project, called Half Cabo, about a quirky Los Angeles private eye for Imagine Television. In December 2013, the Coens stated in an interview that they are working on a new musical comedy centered around an opera singer, though they have said it is not a musical per se. In the same interview, they revealed they are also working on a sword and sandals drama film set in ancient Rome. Production company: the Coen brothers' own film production company, Mike Zoss Productions located in New York City, has been credited on their films from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? onwards. Directing distinctions: up to 2003, Joel received sole credit for directing and Ethan for producing, due to Guild rules that disallowed multiple director credits to prevent dilution of the position's significance. The only exception to this rule is if the co-directors are an established duo. Now that they are able to share the director credit, the Coen brothers have become only the third duo to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Director. The first two pairs to achieve this were Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins, and Warren Beatty and Buck Henry. Only 5 other directors have won 3 Oscars for the same film, a distinction the duo shares with Billy Wilder, James L. Brooks, Francis Ford Coppola, James Cameron, and Peter Jackson. With 8 Academy Award nominations for No Country for Old Men, including Best Picture, Director, Adapted Screenplay, and Film Editing, the Coen brothers have tied the record for the most nominations by a single nominee for the same film. Orson Welles set the record in 1941 with Citizen Kane being nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Screenplay. Warren Beatty tied Welles' record when Beatty was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Screenplay for Reds in 1981. Alan Menken also then achieved the same feat when he was nominated for Best Score and triple nominated for Best Song for Beauty and the Beast in 1991. Collaborators: the Coen brothers often cast certain actors in their films, most frequently Frances McDormand, Steve Buscemi, John Goodman, John Polito, and John Turturro. They have worked twice with Jeff Bridges and Josh Brolin, and at least 3 times with Michael Badalucco, George Clooney, Richard Jenkins, and Stephen Root. The Coens similarly tend to work with certain crews as well, especially Roger Deakins, Jess Gonka, Skip Lievsey, and Mary Zophers. They notably used cinematographer Barry Sonnenfeld on their first 3 films, through Miller's Crossing, until Sonnenfeld left to pursue his own directing career. Deakins has been the Coen brothers' cinematographer for all their subsequent films except Burn After Reading, on which they employed Emmanuel Lubezki, and Inside Llewyn Davis, on which they employed Bruno Del Bonell. Sam Raimi is another frequent collaborator. He helped write The Hudsucker Proxy, which the Coen brothers directed, and the Coen brothers helped write Crime Wave, which Raimi directed. Raimi took tips about filming A Simple Plan from the Coen brothers, who had recently finished Fargo. Raimi has cameo appearances in Miller's Crossing and The Hudsucker Proxy. Raimi and the Coens met when Raimi directed The Evil Dead, for which Joel was hired as an assistant editor. Carter Burwell has scored all of the Coens films, aside from Crime Wave, although T-Bone Burnett produced much of the traditional music in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And The Ladykillers, and was in charge of archive music for The Big Lebowski. Skip Lievsky handles the sound editing for all of the Coens films. Most of the Coens films have been credited to the editor Roderick Jaynes, an alias which refers collectively to the two Coen brothers. Tricia Cooke, Ethan's wife, was also an editor on 3 of their films, after working as assistant editor on several of their earlier films. Michael A. Miller edited Raising Arizona and Miller's Crossing. William Preston Robertson is an old friend of the Coens who helped them with reshoots on Blood Simple and provided the voice of the radio evangelist. He is listed in the credits as the Reverend William Preston Robertson. He has provided vocal talents on most of the Coens films up to and including The Big Lebowski. He is also credited in Raimi's Evil Dead 2 and wrote The Making of The Big Lebowski with Tricia Cooke. Awards, Academy Awards. Ethan and Joel have each been nominated for 13 Academy Awards and have won 4, including 2 Oscars for screenwriting, 1 for Best Director, and 1 for Best Picture. 12 of their nominations were joint, but each received an individual nomination for Fargo. Thus the brothers have 14 combined nominations. They are 2 of only 7 filmmakers with 3 Oscars for the same film. 1991, Barton Fink, Best Supporting Actor, Best Art Direction Euro Set Decoration, Best Costume Design. 1996, Fargo, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay Euro Original, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Film Editing, Best Cinematography. 2000, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Best Screenplay Euro Adapted, Best Cinematography. 2001, The Man Who Wasn't There, Best Cinematography. 2007, No Country for Old Men, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay Euro Adapted, Best Supporting Actor, Best Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Best Sound Editing. 2009, A Serious Man, Best Picture, Best Screenplay Euro Original. 2010, True Grit, Best Picture, Best Actor in a Leading Role, Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Best Achievement in Directing, Best Writing, Screenplay based on material previously produced or published, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Best Sound Editing. 2013, Inside Llewyn Davis, Best Cinematography, Best Sound, BAFTA Awards. 1996, Fargo, Best Film, David Lean Award for Direction, Best Screenplay Euro Original, Best Actress, Best Cinematography, Best Editing. 2000, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Anthony Asquith Award for Film Music, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Production Design, Best Screenplay Euro Original. 2001, The Man Who Wasn't There, Best Cinematography. 2007, No Country for Old Men, Best Film, Best Director, Best Screenplay Euro Adapted, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Best Sound. 2008, Burn After Reading, Best Screenplay Euro Original, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress. 2009, A Serious Man, Best Screenplay Euro Original. 2013, Inside Llewyn Davis, Best Screenplay Euro Original, Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Berlin Film Festival. 1998, The Big Lebowski, Golden Bear, Cannes Film Festival. 1991, Barton Fink, Best Actor, Best Director, Palm Dog. 1994, The Hudsucker Proxy, Palm Dog. 1996, Fargo, Best Director, Palm Dog. 2000, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Palm Dog. 2001, The Man Who Wasn't There, Best Director, Palm Dog. 2004, The Ladykillers, Jury Prize, Palm Dog. 2007, No Country for Old Men, Palm Dog. 2013, Inside Llewyn Davis, Grand Prix, Palm Dog. Dan David Prize. The Coen brothers were awarded the $1 million Dan David Prize in 2011 as a creative partnership unique in the history of filmmaking. Order of Arts and Letters. On October 16, 2013, the Coen brothers were inducted as Commanders of the French Order of Arts and Letters, the country's highest cultural honor. The induction took place in Paris, with the award presented by the Minister of Culture and Communication, or a copyright Live Filippetti. Filmography. Other works. Darkman, a film by friend and sometimes collaborator Sam Raimi. Joel and Ethan did uncredited work on the script and make a brief cameo appearance in the film as extras. Gates of Eden, a collection of short stories written by Ethan Coen. The Drunken Driver Has the Right of Way, a collection of poems and limericks written by Ethan Coen. Bad Santa, a comedy film starring Billy Bob Thornton and executive produced by the Coen brothers. The Coens also did uncredited rewrites. Romance and Cigarettes, a film produced by the Coen brothers and written and directed by John Turturro. Almost an Evening, a series of 3 one-act off-Broadway plays written by Ethan Coen. Fargo, a TV series based on the film, executive produced by Joel and Ethan. Bibliography. Cheshire, Ellen and Ashbrook, John. Joel and Ethan Coen. The Pocket Essential. ISBN A978-1-904048-39-8 includes all films up to the Ladykillers and some subsidiary works. References. External links. Joel Coen at the Internet Movie Database, Ethan Coen at the Internet Movie Database, Kinesk, The Films of the Coen Brothers, Video, The Films of the Coen Brothers, Movie Clip Compilation, 3 minutes.